This is Jeff from the band Possessed, and you're watching Richard Metal Fan.
Hey, what's up, guys? Episode 251 of Richard Metal Fan Interviews, calling from Zoom, and I have the honor and the privilege to speak with the legendary Jeff Becerra from the almighty Possessed. How are you doing today, Jeff? Glad to have you on my show.
A lot of people, including myself, say my name wrong. It's supposed to be Becerra, but I say it's just Becerra, and that's like the American. It's good that we talk about this because so many people pronounce it so many different ways, and not that it matters, but I don't even say it right. So hey, how's it going?
Yeah. Yeah, it's all
Yeah,
good, man. Man,
it's a
so
weird name. A lot of people think it's Italian, but I'm Mexican, and it's so yeah, man. And a lot of people like put one R or two C's. Even on the back of the Censor Media re-release of Seven Churches, they spell my name wrong.
oh
So
wow. Yeah, they need to
yeah,
get their
yeah.
shit together.
No, I mean, so that it tells you how much I was involved with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's so awesome to have you here. So kind of the format is I want to talk do a rundown of your discography and talk about your history as a musical artist. So take me back to young Jeff. So kind of growing up, what were the first bands that got you into metal? What made you want to be a vocalist? And of course, originally slapping a bass.
Well, remember, whenever I was a kid, I was born in '68, so whenever I started my first band in '79, 78, 79, late '78, '79. I'd just say '79. So there was no extreme metal really. There was just hard rock. So when I grew up, a lot of people get embarrassed at the bands I listened to, but that's what we had. We had the Peter Framptons, we had the Led Zeppelins, we had Black Sabbath, we had Aerosmiths, we had things like that. And even when I was a little kid, like we would listen to like it's like Donnie and Marie show, and he'd say I'm a little bit rock and roll. I'd be like, yeah, that's me on the rock and roll side, right? And so growing up, like I always, and of course we listened to. My dad had a bunch of 45s, so I'm always listening to Elvis, Chuck Berry, The Killer, Jerry Lee Lewis, these old '50s rock and roll, and so I grew up just basically listening to what was considered probably the hardest of what was essentially the harder spectrum of the pop church, So
All right. And of course, like I guess your first band talking about is Marauder, which eventually became Blizzard. Like I'm digging deep. Like nobody ever really talks about them.
yeah, yeah, we were we were rocked out little kids, man. We wanted to rock and roll, man. And it was hard times. I mean, we grew up in kind of a lower middle class, kind of blue collar, by the steel mill, which closed down, and Chevron. You could go to the steel mill, which closed down. The Chevron refinery. You could join the army. You could join a street gang. Or college was just not something we did. And I didn't want to do any of those things. So I just kind of saturated. I kind of like ran away from life and the rock and roll. So,
All right. And then tell me about like forming Possessed because you formed in 1983.
but it's a fun fact that I've had six members from the Marauder till now that passed away. Due to drugs and crime and alcohol. So it
Yeah.
was hard times. Yeah. So what was the question?
Yeah. So how did Possessed form? Because you formed in 1983.
Well, I was in Blizzard, which is the band that I started, and I wanted to go heavier. I wanted to go heavier, and they started tripping off. Some older kids came into the spectrum and introduced some, acid and things like that, and they were going to Grateful Dead shows, and that's just like I don't like all that hippie shit. You know what I mean? So there was like a discord. I kind of parted ways. Not that I wasn't doing drugs; I was just doing different drugs.
Yeah.
And so I was doing speed. They were going for expanding their minds, which I never got into that the whole trip, that sort of psychedelic thing. And
Yeah.
so I came to practice one day, and there was my roadie was playing my bass, R.I.P. And they said, "Yeah, you're out of the band." oh man, I was heartbroken because I had never known anything but being in a band, right? So I was lost. It felt very similar to my divorce, the same kind of feeling, you know? And so I just kind of was lost, and it wasn't for very long. I was at in high school, and I was with my girlfriend Pam, who later became Miss Bikini Pennsylvania. I remember we were leaning against the lockers like a freshman, and I had my hands in her front pockets, and I was thinking, man, I can feel her string bikini. And these two like older guys that obviously weren't in high school, they look like bikers, came walking across. I was thinking, oh, these guys are gonna fuck with me, right? So you know, I have no problem fighting. I used to fight a lot, and I was getting ready to throw down, and they were like, "Are you Jeff Becerra?" And I was like, "Yeah, what of it?" And they're like, "Hey, can you come check us out?" And so that was the Mike and Mike's. So I went, and I didn't have any equipment, so I went to a Radio Shack and bought the biggest speakers I could. And me and my dad built these PA cabinets, and I used a Gallon Kruger guitar head. I brought my bass over, and we jammed it. And I guess before that, they were like a Priest and Maiden cover band. So that's, you know, I got the gig, and that's how we started Possessed.
Yeah. Yeah. Then, of course, tell me about making the first Possessed album, Seven Churches, which is a really great debut album. So, what was the thought process going into making the debut full length Possessed album?
Mike had a few songs. He had a few songs that on a Walkman. I took those home, learned them in a day. But of course, without a bass player, it was just Mike and Mike. And the bass kind of cleaned it up. We cleaned everything, we straight timed it. Then they said, "Hey, do you sing?" And I said, "Yeah, I sing." But you know, I was bullshitting. I'd sing backups. And so I just kind of, you know, I'd heard Lemmy, you know, and I was thinking Gene Simmons' God of Thunder too, kind of, you know, but also mixed with all the punk that because I was into punk, a lot of punk. So I kind of just matched the lyrics with the music. And then so I think the first song we did was Exorcist. It was more of a like a lower like register, and really it was more of a, you know, Glenn Bentley or almost modern type sound. And they were like, they looked at me and they're like, "Yeah, but can you tone it down?" So then my voice was that toned down. And so we just went over the songs. We learned it very quick. We practiced a lot, and then we did the demo in late 83, 84. The demo took off. I think we made like 79 copies, and like within weeks it was in Europe. So that like wildfire, man, you know. And
Yeah.
we got an offer from Combat, and which I think was a branch up Electra. I'm not even sure. It was like a little sub chapter of something, and it was like the world's worst contract. But but that album did really well. To put it in perspective, I still make more off of Seven Churches than all the other albums put together. So 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 yeah, it took off really well. But yeah, we did our demo. Then we did the Seven Churches, and by that time we had Larry. I went back almost as a revenge. I nabbed Larry because remember Debbie Abono was our manager, and my band room was with the Blizzard. I wanted my band room back, and I wanted Larry because Larry was the gym in the ring there. So I got Larry, and therefore got my band room back. I went back and kicked them out, and then we set up shop there, and that was really the foundations of, you know, the foothold of Possessed. There is the Seven Churches and getting that new band room.
All right. And of course, like I gotta say this, Jeff, like a lot of people consider you sort of like the guy that pretty much invented death metal. Like people say Possessed is like the very first death metal band, and pretty much like people say Seven Churches is considered like the first death metal album. So how do you feel about being labeled as like the OGs of death metal?
I mean, without trying to sound vainglorious, that we were definitely the first band calling ourselves death metal. We even wrote a song called Death Metal as an at, and a lot of people, what they do is they mix all death metal up with like their favorite, you know, death metal scene. Like you know, like Florida is very popular because here's Possessed, here's Death. You know what I mean? So a lot of people think death metal is just that Florida sound, you know, but but for all first wave death metal, including Death, including the first Cannibal Corpse demo and the first Morbid Angel demo, all first wave original death metal has hard undertones of thrash. So that, by very definition, is original death metal, has a thrash component. And like but back then, you have to remember that Possessed was apples to oranges different than thrash. It was obvious that we were doing something different, and that became less obvious with time and as death metal got harder and harder and harder, right? So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it definitely was intentional. I have death metal copyright with all the other 7 churches since 1983, and yeah, we wanted to be. We knew that there was thrash, we knew there was black metal, there was speed metal, and we wanted to be different, and we wanted to label ourselves as something different. So we said, we'll call Possessed a death metal band, and that way people would say, Possessed, oh, that's that band that calls themselves death metal, right? And so, and our music was obviously different. And naively, I thought that Possessed would be the only death metal band in the world, and that's what would segregate us. Because at the time, plagiarism was really frowned on in the SF Bay Area, which I never planned on leaving the SF Bay Area. I mean, if it were, my goal was just to become popular in my own scene, because that was my world, And so, if I came and I sounded like, Exodus or, or Motorhead, that shit doesn't fly in the Bay Area back in the early 80s. So you had to be different, and we were young, and our nuance was just to be the heaviest, most satanic band, in the world. And at that time, I think we accomplished that without, trying
Yeah.
to toot my own horn.
Yeah, I agree, because like people, like, this is, like I mentioned before, the first death metal album. Like, I feel like the way I describe it is like kind of like how Black Sabbath was with their first album. Because when you first heard the Black Sabbath, is almost kind of like when you hear Possessed for the first time, if because they both kind of like started like different styles of the metal.
Yeah, it was really different. In fact, I think that it was not to my advantage to be the first, because, whenever you're the first at something, you usually don't get any recognition until you're dead. And it's really like when you're the first, people really shun that. People don't embrace new things. Like it's like when people reminisce on life, they like the past because it's comfortable. We know what happens, right? But when you do something new or avant-garde, it's usually not met with anything but disdain. And I think a lot of that disdain is really carried over because people either fucking hate Possessed or they love us, Yeah, there's no like lukewarm Possessed people. They either acknowledge us or they hate us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and how do you feel about like people citing you guys as influences? Because I know you guys are like the first band, and then of course like they would later influence, like, of course, Death and Cannibal Corpses and the Deicides and the more Morbid Angels, and even now with newer bands like Frozen Souls, Sanguisuga Bog, 200 Stab Wounds, and even Necrot. So I feel like death metal, it just comes in like all these new waves.
yeah, I think that it's all one big conglomerate. We brand ourselves for recognition, and then we kind of stick to our own groups. But I think all bands reach out and take from each other, and I think that I'm honored that people would do that. It's mind blowing, and all those bands that you name are excellent bands, and I look up to them too, and I think it's kind of it's a mutual respect that comes within the community, because yeah, it's a tight knit community. As much as the internet talks shit or whatever, when you're out on the road, like, we're all brothers out there. So it's a friendship and kind of a camaraderie, and I think that goes along with it.
All right. And next year will mark the uh the 40th anniversary of this album. Is there a chance maybe you'll do a celebration of this somehow? Maybe do a tour you played start to finish?
Next year,
Yeah.
yeah. In fact, I'm playing Ecuador soon, and I'm gonna do much of the 7 churches, kind of like as a prelude to that. And yeah, I'm sure we usually kind of acknowledge the anniversaries whenever we can, but we also, try to push. We throw in new stuff because we're always pushing the new stuff. And with the advent, right now I'm writing the next album, so we want to kind of we want to keep rooted in the past, but firmly with our right foot in the future. Yeah.
All right. But when Seven Churches like first came out, what was like the whole like album and tour cycle like? Did you start playing like outside of like California for the first time? Did you like make it out to like the East Coast?
Yeah, yeah. When we did Seven Churches, we got our first European tour. I think that was in '86. I think that was the first time I went to Europe. I don't even know how many times I've been to Europe now. I honestly couldn't tell you. But then we did. We immediately, even after the demo, we started playing like shows with Slayer, and we played with Merciful Fate. We played with Megadeth. We played with Suicidal, TRI. Just all Corrosion of Conformity. Like, well, all those bands there. This is like the pre-famous days or pre-known days. They all kind of stuck the punk, the hardcore punk, the crossovers. They didn't know where to stick us, so we got stuck with punk a lot, and that kind of blended in and started like the crossover. Everybody started like feeding off of each other, and it was really kind of revolutionary. But yeah, as soon as we started gigging, because we gigged all the time, like I don't know, we played with Exodus like a lot. Like the original, we played like 150 club shows in a couple years. Uh, yeah, so we started reaching out, going to LA, going to like Oregon. We did the two Slayer tours. I think it was the Show No Mercy and the second album are right around those times. We got that Slayer tour, and that was great. Like that was a real boon in America. And then the European shows that got us out there, and it was crazy because I'd never been to Europe, and that's when we started playing our first like couple thousand people and up type shows. And so it was really cool, man. It was really cool. It happened all very fast. And Larry was 15 on Seven Churches. I was 16. And so by the time I
Wow.
was 18, we were well footed in the scene. And back for the first 2 years, like, because that was really we were the only death metal band on the planet. So it was a novelty, and it was great. It felt revolutionary. It felt fun, and it was some wild ass times.
Yeah. And you also have like a really great fan base. I know like you have like I guess the unofficial sort of fan group called Legion of the Seven Churches, hence named after the first album. So how did the idea to have like your own, I guess you can call it like a fan club come to be?
That's actually not a fan club. It's a club. It's a music club. So we're in 23 countries. We have our bag patches, and it's a music club. So
Yeah.
you have to kind of have a perspective period, of 6 months, and you get kind of weaned into it, and it's kind of like a more exclusive kind of fan club, and but we're not super exclusive. Like I think our only bylaw is don't be a dick.
Yeah.
So
Good words
so
to
we have
live
our
by.
yeah, we have our private page, which is easy because like if you're not insane, like you know how to follow those rules.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, because I found out about that from my buddy Mark who lives in Georgia.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
great, and I think we're in 23 countries now. So
Holy shit, that's nuts.
yeah, yeah, it grew fast.
Yeah. But then kind of going into the second album, Beyond the Gates, I thought this was a really good follow-up to Seven Churches because usually with the debut album, you have your entire life to write, and there's a lot of hype with the first album. When it came to making Beyond the Gates, did you feel any pressure to follow up Seven Churches?
Oh yeah, we were under a very strict contract. We had to do an album a year. So that was with Combat, and so that's why we have the boom, boom, boom. We did, and then unfortunately, the guys called it quits after that. But yeah, but it was great because we were very much into it, and slowly as once I got Larry, because me and Larry were in a band since we were like 11, since little kids. So, and we had been doing professional gigs since we were little kids. And even though the two Mikes were older, I don't think they'd ever played a show. They'd been in the garage. So we were the two young guys. They were the two older guys, and we brought I don't know, maybe it cleaned up a lot. Everything got more tight, and Larry started doing more writing, and we started, our voice started becoming, more possessed. And I think I also think that, remember the Satanic Panic happened right around Seven Churches, and so they pulled all our fucking albums off the shelves, and so that really put a dent in American sales, especially. And so what we stopped saying the words death metal. That became taboo. And we took the cross off, and we kind of were going to a we were just trying to get our music to be able to be sold at that point. So we has a bit of more for lack of a better word, commercial viability. Unfortunately, something happened in the mastering. The original version of Beyond the Gates sounded tits, man. It was fucking awesome, man. The guitars were so fucking good, right? And then something happened in the mastering, and it made them all tinny and thin. And so that's the even though I still like I think that Beyond the Gates is probably my favorite album, but I wish that tone would have survived, man. So it would have been a banger, because that was our foray into going to a major label. We were being sought after by the bigger labels, and so yeah, man, that was a real stumble. And that's part of the curse of Possessed, like every time we start to almost get somewhere, something tragic happens. So
Yeah. Yeah, but then I know like a year later you also did the Eyes of Horror EP in 1987, and I have the version which has Beyond the Gates and the EP combined
that's
in
rare.
one.
That's actually worth a lot of money now.
Yeah. Oh, really? I think it was like used. I think it was like off of eBay or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But tell me about making like that EP. Was that something to just like hold fans over before you would have made like a third album?
Our relationship was pretty rocky by that time. I don't even think I saw the mic in the studio. It was mostly me and Larry in there. Larry does on the albums. Larry does all the rhythms, So essentially, Mike does the solo, and and writes. But we went to Fantasy Studios out in Berkeley, and I don't know if you're familiar. It's the tallest building in Berkeley. It's where they did the English Patient, the movie. They do movie soundtracks there, and Larry was taking lessons from Joe Satriani at the time,
Oh,
who was very
wow.
easy to get. You could just go into a magazine. He had in Bay Area magazine, BAM. He had said Joe Satriani guitar lessons, $20 a half an hour, and so Larry was taking lessons from him. And so we asked Joe to do the to produce it, and he came in there, and Joe's the man, and he kind of really latched on really quick. He's super brilliant to what we were doing, and we did the EP there as part of the contract. And I remember we were between like David Lee Roth band and Night Ranger, and Night Ranger had better drum mics. So I went over there and I put little pieces of tape to mark exactly where their mics were, and borrowed their mics, and then put them all back and removed the tape. So yeah, and that was that. We did it. It was a giant, like I think we spent so much money on that EP, like $85,000 or something.
Holy
And
shit.
it was fun, man. That was back in the analog days, man, pre-digital. So it
Yeah.
was all like big giant outboard, and it was really cool. That was my first giant, I think, my first and only really giant studio uh, uh, endeavor.
Yeah, but then it was around that the same year, like Possessed had broke up. So how hard was it to like end things with Possessed?
It was like it ended with a like an ambient actually. Larry went. Larry was always, he's a musician, he's an artist. He's always thinking, always playing, always wanting to expand. So when we grew up listening to Les Claypool, we all grew up in El Sobrani, me and Les and Larry. And so Les was one of the El Salv number one guys, and and that's kind of an inside joke that El Salv number one. But Kirk Hammett lived around the corner from me. I used to ride my skateboard to his house. Exodus was around. Outrage, which is a pre-Exodus. I think YNT was around there. The Greg Kim band, Green Day, they were like the kind of little stoner punks. Hey, you got a joint? skating around. And so it was a very small, like 4 mile square town with all these bands in it. And so we knew who Les was. He was a genius. And so when he invited Larry, of course, jumped on that. And we had become, I guess Larry had really become so integral to the band. And my logic was, well, let's just get a new guitarist and keep going. We're about to get signed to a major. But touring is difficult. And a lot of people, I hate to say it, but a lot of people don't want to wake up and say, oh, I'm 55 years old. All I've ever done is play in a satanic death metal band. And that was the Mikes. They just wanted to go back and live normal, quiet, normal lives. And I can't fault them for that. I mean, 2020 hindsight, if that's what they want, that's I respect that. So that was that. And Possessed disbanded. And I always wanted to put it back together, but unfortunately, I got shot twice. So.
All right. And then it was like after Possessed, you did like two bands, Misery and Sub-Zero in 1988. Hey, tell me about those bands. Like nobody ever talks about them.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Wow, that's right. Yeah, me and Steve. Steve was great, man. I wrote a song. Down, 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 down. Wow, maybe I can use that. Wow, I forgot all about that. Yeah, man. Steve was great, man. That was back, in I was just in my mind, I was still in Possessed, but I needed to get something else, and so I was reaching out and doing jams with, whoever I could find, and it was deceptively hard to find people to jam. And in fact, I put an ad out on KUS app radio, and I found one guy, and we started jamming. We ended up being roommates, and that kind of spun off into nowhere. And me and Steve jammed with Sub-Zero, and we had a couple really good songs, but I was just not. Things just weren't mentally clicking my way. I was just not in the right spot.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I'm not really good with these kind of awkward situations, but after that you
I
were,
tried out for Heathen too. Remember the band Heathen?
yeah. Anyway, like,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm not really good with these kind of awkward situations, but it was like after that you had the shooting that happened. But during that time, how hard was it to like recover and get back to like rocking out?
I'm. It was for me. It was super difficult. Like it was. I shouldn't even be here. I mean, I essentially just did not take it well. I basically tried to, commit suicide with drugs and alcohol for almost 5 years, like 4 years, and wound down at the end of the fourth year. I just wasn't taking it well, and I just sat in my room, essentially playing bass and playing guitar alone. I lived alone for 5 years. Well, I mean, when I came out of the hospital, I didn't have a place to live, so I was homeless. I lived in a rescue mission for a couple months in order to save up enough money to rent a little house, which is a nice house. It's a cute house now that I think about it, next to bikers and prostitute, drug dealers, and I kind of just sat in that little court, and fell into depravity and depression, really, drugs and alcohol, and at the end of that, I just I had bought a bottle of whiskey. I went out onto the front porch, and it was magical. Like the sun kind of broke through the clouds and hit the ground, and I was like, "Fuck this!" And I smashed the bottle without taking a drink. I rolled down to the local community college, and by the grace of Satan or whatever, they were doing enrollment soon. They sent me down to social services. I took an IQ test, like literally high as fuck, and I guess I scored really high, so they waived my tuition, and I started attending junior college. I made straight A's. well, before I went to college, I checked myself into a 47-day drug rehabilitation in-home treatment, and cleaned up. Went to college, made straight A's. I was one of 20 gold roads. Then I went to San Francisco State University. I was a president of my class, honor society on both. I'm on honor societies with like Nobel laureates and presidents and ex-presidents, and I was the webmaster, the president of my class, straight A's, and everything was cool, man. It was it really I think I really needed that in order to get my self-esteem back, and my interpersonal communication skills, and to really just get my mind wired right. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
also, in my mind, I didn't know if I'd have the band or whatever, because in the '80s, there's no fucking way I could have went back in a wheelchair. Society has grown a lot more than people recognize. Like, it's more inclusive now. It's more open to things, right?
Yeah, very
And so,
accepting.
yeah, it's very accepting. And I don't think that uh I would have, because remember back when I started, there were very few women, very few people of color, in the scene. And there was no wheelchairs. You still hardly see wheelchairs in metal. But
It's very diverse and accepting.
it, I mean, I wouldn't say very diverse, but it's more diverse.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean, I think we always have a ways to go in everything, but and of course, other countries are not America, so the metal's going to go on in Spain, Italy, to South America and everything like that. But in America, it's definitely, we're growing as a people in a lot of ways. So
totally. Because I know also you briefly reformed Possessed in the early 90s. You did like that demo in 93. So tell me about like that
that
little
that was
demo.
without me. I don't know if I should even talk about this, but I was still laid up in bed. I came out, I think it was 91 or not, yeah, 91. I was still recovering. I was in a hospital bed, in a room, just still fucked up, like coming down off all the narcotics and everything they give you while you're in the hospital. And Mike Trail came over and he said, "Yeah, he essentially told me he's gonna take the band." And at that time, I didn't think I was gonna come back. I was like, whatever. He said, "I would ask you to come back, but you're in a wheelchair and people would just laugh at you." And I was like, all right, well, fuck you too then. And so he went out, and of course he quit again. And so, and it was, they did like a demo. It didn't sound like Possessed. I liked it, but it sounded more like Garage Band Morbid Angel. And so I wasn't involved with that. And he quit again. But I did, I mean, at that time I supported him, but I think it was around that time when I realized that, I don't want Possessed to turn into this, let's be like other bands type thing. And so later on, as soon as I got my head together and got out of college, I reformed it, and
Yeah.
and it was a lot harder than I thought it was. Like, to give credit to Mike too, like initially I was jamming with the Sadistic Intent guys. They weren't playing the songs right. We were in B flat, and so we did that in order to kind of get my sea legs. But as soon as I started writing new music, I wanted a real band. So I know I'm
Yeah.
talking a lot, but
Yeah.
so I went out and got the best guys I could and put my best foot forward, and really put an earnest, put everything into it.
Yeah, but I know before that you also did the side effect in 2002. Like, was that like something to sort of like help you before you ended up like restarting Possessed?
That was with one of my best friends, probably my best friend at the time, rest in peace, Kenny Bertoncini. He was taking a pr- production class in junior college at Diablo Valley College, and he said, "Jeff, you got to help me out. I have my finals, and I have to produce my own demo or song demo. I have to produce a song in order to get a good grade in the class." So I wrote some lyrics, and he said, "Will you sing?" I said, "Of course." I loved Kenny, and so I wrote Hemorrhage, and the next day we went into the studio and we recorded it in the college. It was a little college studio, and it was funny because there was a door here, and then the library was here, and I peeked out because I know I'm going to be yelling, and there's all these like Asian kids studying, and like and so when I started yelling, I peeked out again, and they had all moved to the far side of the library. And so, and the teacher left. He wanted no part of it. I said, "You don't like this?" He's like, "No, I can't stand this kind of music. It's satanic." And it was like, so we were on our own, you know. And
Yeah.
so we did it, and you got an A, and it was called the Hemorrhage. Ironically and tragically, uh, Kenny got liver failure. He got a liver right directly after that. He got a transplant and died of a brain hemorrhage in the hospital. So
Oh shit. Yeah.
yeah, but I love Kenny, and it's nice that we have you know, with Ed and everybody, and and uh and all the Rick and everybody to play that song. And I also did a with Schizo. Um I did a little cameo on Metallic Tyrants, which is kind of cool.
Cool. And then flash forward to 2007, you got back, Possessed got back together. So what made you decide to come back?
Uh, we originally there was a tribute album, and they wanted me to do a cameo on the tribute album. Now, me and my wife at the time drove down to LA and partied out. We recorded The Exorcist, and they said, "Hey, let's just do one gig, right?" I said, "Fuck it," you know, like, you know, and I was scared, you know, I didn't know how people would react to the chair, and I didn't know if I liked it, you know, if it, you know, even in my own mind. People, handicapped people, used to freak me out, you know, and then I became one. I realized that we're just normal people like everybody else. And people should just look past the chair and see people as people. But so then we did the cameo, and then we did a Hollywood show, which turned to like two or three, and people were going fucking nuts. And then I was hooked. I was hooked again. Like that's all I wanted to do again. So,
Were you like
but I
nervous at
always
all
knew I
with that
wanted
first
to do it.
show?
Yeah, I mean that's what made me wait so long. It's just I was scared. I didn't know how people would react, you know. So, and I didn't want to like tarnish the name of Possessed, and you know, the powers that be didn't want Possessed to come back. And I just kind of, in typical Jeff fashion, I just threw it up and did whatever I wanted. So
All right. And then flash forward many years later to 2019, you dropped probably one of my favorite comeback albums and pretty much one of my favorite albums from that year, Revelations of Oblivion. I thought this was a fan-fucking-tastic album. So how was the writing and recording process like for this album?
it's different. It's always painful and difficult and challenging, but always very exciting. And it's like being on a tightrope with no net, you know. And so, yeah, luckily, I've hooked up with my guys now, and me and Danielle Gonzalez are kind of like the Lennon McCartney of Possessed. We put it all together, and you know, and I wanted to show people what value I really brought to Possessed, you know. And so, I again, I just put my best foot forward. I think I put a lot of real time and effort, and did the best I could, and I do. I like that album. I'm very pleased with it.
Yeah. And musically, did you wanted to pick up where you left off after Beyond the Gates, or being that it has been like 30 plus years since the Possessed album, it's almost kind of like a new beginning for the band in a way.
I mean, at the end of the day, we're just artists. You say, you know, oh, why did you do this? Why did you do that? It's just like a painter or anything else. Painter's going to paint, you know, and musicians are just like any other artist. You know, I feel lost unless I'm creating something, and so even when wasn't in Possessed, I still recording, making music, and that's all I do. And I do that for myself as much as anything. But yeah, I mean, I just I'm kind of a one trick pony, you know. Like when you hear Possessed, when you hear me, you go, "Oh, that's Possessed," right? And that's because yeah, that's me, you know. And so I just continued being me, and I just wrote what I thought was heavy. Like I don't like over try. Like I'm smart enough to know that you don't have to have blast beats 24/7 in order to be heavy. And that's what I like about Possessed is even though people say, "Oh, you're trash" or whatever, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I like those melodies. I like those nuances and rhythms, and I try to incorporate that in, and so that when you do have a heavy part, it hits as heavy instead of just full bore all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I maybe I'm explaining this wrong, but the process is to have like a book, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that goes with all albums, you know, you just, it's like each, there's so much effort. It's like making a movie or writing a book. Like when you make an album, everything goes into it. Like, and so we just, all you can do is put everything into it, roll the dice, and hope that people will like it. You know?
Yeah. And how did it feel to have like a new Possessed album after 33 years?
It felt incredible. I was amazed at the power of the internet. Like it was, your reach is so much further now than back in the 80s, you know. And and so I would say that Possess is, it's way bigger now than it ever was. So yeah, that's the internet, man. So it was incredible, you know. I
Yeah.
started doing social media, and you know, like I'm that old guy that talks too much on social media now. So
Yeah, but even before you released Revelations of Oblivion, was there even doubts that there will be a new Possessed album?
I originally I didn't want to just do like a money grab. Like I don't like when bands just come back and you know they just throw something together to make money. And you know and so we were a band for what 13 years before Revelation of Oblivion. I wanted it to be the real Possessed. And by far, this is the most real group of guys I've ever played with. This is by far the most real uh uh um what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, earnest version of what Possess should be, because these guys have stuck through me for you know, Possess been around like four times as long as the first time now. So and Dan's been with me like 9, 10 years. You know, we've since I come back, like I just want to get the most real and earnest version of Possessed. And so yeah, it feels good to have a real band that doesn't have Discord. There's not like some sort of stupid competition or you know infighting, or you know we could just concentrate and focus on the music, and that's that.
Yeah. And being as it has been 5 years since Revelations of Oblivion, have you started working on the next Possessed album? Like, what's the status with that, if you're allowed to say?
Yeah, I'm allowed to stay. I mean, I still have two more albums on this contract, so I will have this one and the next one for sure. And so I'm 4 songs deep into a 10 song album. We have 7 songs completely written music wise, with a little bit of work on one, and so and we're working on the eighth. So we're getting there. We're almost halfway to having it written. So. I don't want to rush things though. Like it's weird because I had 4 songs done. I was sure of it. I sent it to the guys that like this is fucking killer. And then I listened back and I was like, no, fuck. And so now I'm gonna redo some of it. So that's what I was what I'm gonna do right after we hang up is I'm gonna go back to writing and recording lyrics. So
All right. And kind of like in the end to sort of wrap things up, what's next for Possessed in terms of like tours and stuff? Have you have any more tours lined up?
yes. We I'm going to Ecuador and on April 18th. And then I'm going to South America June 1st through 9th. And then I can't talk about the tour, but I'm gonna do 47 dates in the United States with a bigger band. So that's kind of
Mhm.
a new one. Usually Possessed headlines, but we're gonna open up for a much bigger band and
Yeah.
do a United States tour.
Nice. I'm hoping that you come to Atlanta. I would love to see you again because you kicked ass the
I,
last time I saw you.
I think we are going to Atlanta. I'll look at the schedule after and hit you offline.
Yes. Awesome. So thank you, Jeff, for taking this time to talk. It's great to have Possessed on my show finally. There's just any final words you want to say to the viewers that are watching us to close this out?
I really appreciate your time and for reaching out to all the fans and supporters out there. Stay blessed, stay possessed. You know, I love you. You guys mean the world to me, man. I'm nothing without you. and I look forward to seeing you on the road and hearing what you hear about my new stuff.
Awesome. So everybody, Jeff from Possessed, see you next time.